Hey guys, listen, I've got to try and give you a bit of an update on some of the things that have been happening over here in Bali. So, if you watched one of my vlogs a couple of months back, no, a few weeks ago, we were talking about a villa that we were looking to pick up as an investment, and we were going to do it up, and then we were going to rent it back out and try and make a few dollars on it. A very common practice over here in Bali. One of the reasons for that is they have really long leases over here. You can rent property for 25, sometimes even 50 years. And so they just rent you the land, which means they still own the land, but they just let you build a house and occupy it for the next 20 odd years. At the end of that, they might renegotiate a lease and say, yeah, you can go and rebuild the house or put a big resort on there or lease it out to someone else. When you leave, the building pretty much stays where it was. So it's not a bad job. It's not a bad concept because you're not paying full value on the land, but and for an investment, it's a good idea because you've got a finite period of time where you're selling or you own the entitlement or the rights to that property. So you could buy a property or lease a property for 20 years. You can build a house or an apartment block or whatever you want. You can then find tenants for that apartment block, whether it's multiple or individual tenants. You can legally rent them out. But here's the problem. You need to know that the person that you're signing a lease with has actually still got the rights to the piece of dirt under your feet, because they very often in Bali they won't sell the land, and in fact it's even more complicated because you can't, as an outsider, as a Westerner or as a non-Indonesian, just walk up and start buying property. There are ways of doing it, and the most common way is still to marry someone over here and put it in their name. And I know hundreds of people. To be honest, this is one of the biggest scams ever in Bali. I do know hundreds of people who have come over here and they've put investments like property, vehicles, businesses in an Indo's name, in a Balinese or a local person's name, and it's all gone really well until it fell apart, and that person, the local person, the Indonesian citizen, ends up walking away from the deal, taking everything that you've put in their name with them, and you end up sometimes bankrupt. You end up with almost nothing, and it's pretty bloody hard to chase through the legal system to get your money back. So, oh look, investing in Bali, I've got to say, is one of the most tricky things. Now, listen, I've had a few comments on some of my recent vlogs about retiring or moving or living in Bali. I'll say this right up the front. So, Jonathan, if you're watching this, please understand I've said this in every vlog that I can recall. If you're thinking of coming to Bali, retiring to Bali, living in Bali, investing in Bali, buying a property in Bali, anything more than a holiday, get bloody good advice, not off the internet, not off Muzza. I'm just here to give you some stories and some true information to the best of my knowledge about what I've been told by experts, what I've been told by victims, and what I've seen with my own two eyes or experienced myself. I am not a legal expert. I'm not an immigration attorney. I'm going off, and I've always given the credit back to the legal minds that I use to try to verify my stories. And if I can't, I'll tell you straight up front what it is. So all I can do is give you some advice, paint a picture for you. If you want to come over here, in fact, I'll tell you, I'm going to put a link to a consultant that I've been using for legal and for immigration issues. He's bloody thorough. And he's really, really good. And he's the sort of guy if you want to go and buy a property or lease a property yourself for 10, 20 years, whatever, or maybe 12 months, I don't know, he'll sit there and chase the paper trail to find out actually who still owns the land. So one of the biggest places that gets screwed up, and again, this is anecdotal information from people, including me, who've just been caught out myself in a multi-level, not a scam directly, but a multi-level contractual collapse, let's call it that. Just say I am a local and I own land, and I rent that land out on a long-term lease to someone else. Could be a family member, could be just an investment that I'm sort of partially involved with, but just passively in the background. I'm not actively being the main property manager or something. In 20, 30 years' time, if something happens to me, the expectation is that land will go on to my children or to my inheritance or through my estate, and in Australia it would get passed through the trust department or the lawyers and whatnot, and the title would be transferred immediately to the rightful heir or the right person. What happens a lot over here is there's properties here that are still in the name of the person that owned them 80 years ago. And it's just land. We're not talking directly about necessarily about bricks and mortar. We're just talking about the ground. Now, so if you inherit the land off your dad and haven't yet gone through all of the paperwork to transfer the title and all the bits and pieces over in your name, then if I make a contract with you, even though you've got the approval or the authority to sign or to as the de facto owner, to say, yeah, that's my responsibility, I want to rent that property out to this person. If your dad isn't there to sign off as the owner of the land, or your grandfather or something else, then the contract that you're giving me it may not be valid at all. It may be completely non-binding. And these things called underhand agreements and I don't know. It's bloody confusing because of the time delay. In Australia, if you lease a property or you rent a place for more than a year or two, you're doing pretty well. Over here, you might have to lease it for 25 years just to get the land. And you might have to pay up front for that. So you might have paid, or you might pay up front for half of it, and then on the anniversary of 10 years, you've got to pay the next half or something. If you don't fulfill that contract, or if you die, if you could be the middleman, and you don't fulfill that contract, if something happens that changes in any of the steps behind you, then you could find yourself with an unenforceable contract. And someone else might be in charge. You might have given it to your nephew to say, okay, you look after the land for me. I don't want to have to worry about it. Granddad's property. I'm in charge, but you can go and lease it out, or you can build a unit or flats or something on there and rent it out. And there are so many thousands of units or flats or even giant, like the land under some of these big hotels and resorts is, in a lot of cases, are still owned by the original Balinese. But the land is being leased long term by the Radisson or the Hyatt or the Hilton or whoever. So it gets me to my point. If you want to come to Bali, the one word my wife uses more than anything else is be patient. And why is that? Because everything you do here, on a legal, on a financial, on an emotional, on a occupational level, is bloody complicated. It's never as easy as you think it might be, even when you've got all the paperwork done. And it is the most frustrating thing I've ever done. I swear to God, it's bloody hard. So I will tell you my little story. About a month ago, we found a property that was in the middle of Legian. It was in a beautiful location, very close to the beach. It was a very inexpensive property to lease long term. And we evaluated and thought, okay, we did some sums and thought if we put about $5,000 of our money into doing that property up, then we should be able to rent that property out for a little bit more than we're actually paying for it. So if we take that over 5 years and with an option of a further 5, over 10 years you actually make quite a nice little profit, potentially. That's assuming there's no catastrophes or international pandemics or things that are going to change all that. But it wasn't a huge investment to buy in. And I thought, well, look, it's a good start, especially because I was looking at picking something up that we could rent out for around about $200 a month, or $200 a week, which makes it over 3 months about $2,000 worth. And I've been saying to so many people, if you want to come to move over to Bali, or if you're thinking of retiring over here, find a nice cheap place you can stay that's comfortable, that's clean, that's in a good location, and just get your bearings before you move over here, before you sell anything in Australia or at home, wherever you're coming from. Come over here as a resident, not as a holiday maker. Don't stay in a motel. Stay in a house, in a villa, in a place where you've got a little bit of chance to drive around, get familiar with the place, understand the laws, do some networking, all the things that are critical before you jump on a plane. I honestly know people who have come over here with a pocket full of money, retired, or they've got an inheritance. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a property. They've been here 2 or 3 months and they said, I can't handle it, and they're going home. It is difficult living in Bali. There are so many little silly complications, and if people are turning away and go, well, in that case I won't do it, good, because you're probably not going to make it anyway, even if you're right. It is tough, and there are so many roadblocks that are going to try and stop you, and it means that the people that end up staying here long term, I got to say, they're resilient buggers, and they've got this sort of far off stare. They look at young people like me coming into the market and go, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I don't, but I listen to what they're talking about, and that's what I'm trying to avoid for you. And I fell into exactly the same trap as I've been. Oh. So what happened? We spoke to the owner, or to the manager of the property. We gave him a deposit. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough. We gave him a deposit while we went through contracts and wrote things down. We asked to speak directly to the owner of the property. He said that's not possible. It's family. He's looking after it for his brother, or there was a couple of different stories. I went to my legal consultant, and Frank is one of the best people I know to ask complicated questions to. If you know my mate Dazza, we also did a story about Dazza and his wife who have come over here semi-retirement. They were about to put $200,000 down on the table for I think it was a 10-year lease for a $20,000 a year a villa, beautiful place to live. And he was cashing in all his savings in Australia to come over here and spend at least 10 or more years in Bali. And that all went to the toilet as well. It just, the person that was offering him a contract and offering and negotiating with him had absolutely no legal right to the property. And it wasn't until Frank did his homework, this is the lawyer guy, he's a consultant, shall we say. He's so useful for things like immigration, he's so useful for things like conveyancing and property and setting up businesses and stuff like that. A heap of my friends that are living over here or come over here regularly have been using him, and that's how I got hold of him. But so through doing that due diligence, my mate found out that this guy that he was trying to sign a contract with has no authority to sign it. And in fact, his contract wasn't void anymore because he hadn't fulfilled the terms and conditions. So him trying to sell a property that he didn't even own or rent a property out that he had no legal right to could have meant that my mate's handed over $200,000 to a person that could have just turned around and walked away, and you'd never see the back of him. In my case, it was only a pretty small investment, so there was a little bit of should we give it a go anyway, because it wasn't easy to get hold of the rightful owner. We were thinking, well, I know other people that live in the same area. I know, and I'm not really fussed about how much. So I got my mate Katut, who's a local Balinese, to come and negotiate with the property owner of the place we were looking at. And he gave me every assurance in the world. Listen, I'm Balinese. We don't go back on contracts. We're honest. We're loyal. Whatever. And every time we went to him and said, okay, well, we want it for 5 years, but we're going to offer it for another 5 years with some interest. And we're, yeah. And we come back with a contract, and he looked at it and goes, nah, not happy. Only want maximum 5 years. Can we do this? When can we start? Can we have... every time we went back with a contract, and I promise you, there's a pile of papers now where they've said to us, this is what we want, and we've said, okay, we'll write that up in Bahasa and also have it translated to English, so I understand what arrangements we're making. And then we'd hand them the contract And he turn around and say, okay, well, I'll change my mind, or I'll have a look at it, I'll sign it tomorrow and get it back to you. I don't know whose his advice was, but someone else is behind him saying, don't sign, because this guy's trying to make money off your unit. So he's come back and he's jacked the price up, or he's shortened the terms, or he's changed the terms and conditions, or at one stage he even said, we're not going to let you sublet it. And I said, well, there's no point in doing anything, because I'm not buying it to live in. I've got a place to live. I'm buying it so that I can provide accommodation for people who follow my vlogs, who want to come over to Bali, and who are looking for a short, medium-term accommodation so they can sort of base themselves and move around Bali easily. I think it's a good idea. But for the last month, every other day I've been on the phone or going to the point where I tell you what, my wife has been saying, Muzza, be patient, more than normal. And I don't even want to go back to this guy and get my deposit back. I'm going to send it to it, because if I see this guy face to face, I'm going to be very upset with him. We have been messed around so much. It's cost us money. It's cost us a huge amount of time. We've actually started buying stuff. Stupid, I shouldn't have, but we started buying bits and pieces to put in the villa, because we had a handshake. We were ready to go, and all we had to do was just change one little part of the contract, which had the amount, the details, or the length, or something. And we had copies of their ID. We had everything finished, and at the very last minute, about after the fourth attempt, they changed the whole thing again and just almost pulled the rug out straight from under us. So all I'm going to say is, don't give up. If you want to live in Bali, there are changes to the regulations all the time. There is interpretations of the regulations. They keep bringing rules in, or announcing changes, and then it seems like they don't enforce those changes, or the interpretation of those changes isn't quite what it would appear to be. So more than anything I've said, if you want to come to Bali to live, to invest, to buy, to rent, and even more so to retire, get your ass over here first. Spend some time living, staying in Bali, get a villa, get in touch. I do now know a number of people that have got villas that rent them out. And I'm going to keep looking for more villas that my wife can set up a nice little villa rental long term. Not interested in weekend soldiers and people that just want to come over for a few days here and a few days there, because I'm way too busy for that. But we are looking at a way, while we're living here, to utilise not only the audience that we've got throughout the world with the YouTube, but also the contacts and the people and the networks that we've got here in Bali. Because the only way you're going to get an apartment for $5,000 or less a year is if you're here and you find someone, you get in the know, you do some networking, and you can find an apartment for $5,000 a year pretty easily. You can get cheaper ones, but you probably wouldn't want to stay there because they're going to have a long drop toilet, and they're not going to have a kitchen, or they're not going to have amenities that you would expect. And knowing the difference and finding those places, there are hundreds and hundreds of good ones that aren't a bad price. But you've got to be here, and you've got to be prepared to be flexible. If you want to come over here and set up a business, I'm going to do much more interviews with people that are running businesses over here, because this is huge. If you want to come over here as an investor, set up a business, and then go back to Australia and just pop over 2 or 3 times a year, my biggest advice would be, think again, don't do it. I don't know, honestly, I'm trying to think. I don't know many, if any, people that have tried to run a successful business from overseas here in Bali. There seems to be a whole culture. The minute you turn your back, they just stop working. As soon as the boss isn't here, they don't even turn up to work. And they go, oh no, we didn't make any money last week. I know hundreds of stories that people tell me all the time. I've got about 500,000 people a month watching what I'm doing on YouTube. So you can imagine the number of stories, emails, and messages I get, and face-to-face conversations I have with people saying, "Oh my God, you would not believe what happened," and now it's me saying to you, "I didn't believe what happened," even because I thought I had it sorted out. I had local Balinese. I've got a wife who speaks perfect Bahasa, and we had the contracts all drafted and agreed upon. We'd shaken upon it. We'd taken it to that last stage, and luckily I really hadn't pushed the go button before we actually had that piece of paper. And now this guy's turned out to be an absolute dick. I'm so glad I'm not there, because can you imagine if he's changed his mind 5 or 6 times during the negotiation and just shown how greedy or how disrespectful he is of what I'm trying to improve the building that he's in charge of. He don't care. It's not his building. If I got to speak to the owner directly, they'd probably say, "Well, I've got 600 other. I don't care either." So I'm trying to invest money in a property that is going to give me a return, and he's just sitting there saying, "Well, if you could rent it for more money, or why don't I rent it for more money?" Look, they're just trying to live. I understand it. I'm not trying to exploit anyone. I was offering him good money for a good prospect. It was giving me a modest return. Unfortunately, every time we went back, they changed their mind. And if I had started pulling tiles out and changing the kitchen, and this guy had a change of heart at that stage, I'd be in a bigger hole, because legally I wouldn't have been covered, because the guy who was signing the lease, as we said from the very beginning, wasn't in charge of, didn't own the land. Be bloody careful if you're coming to live or to spend time in Bali, or to invest. Be careful what you do with your money. There are so many loopholes, there are so many hooks, or so many distractions or frustrations. Oh my God. I went down to open a bank account today, finally, after years of being over here. You have to have your residence, you have to have all this other documentation just to open a bank account. And there was 2 people in line before me, and it was over an hour before I actually got to sit down at the counter. And all they said then was just, "Here's the app, fill it in, and we'll set a bank account up." And they didn't answer any questions. It's bloody frustrating. It's a beautiful place to live. It has its warts. It has its skin knuckles. It has a few problems with sanitation, with the temperature. The climate can be terrible at times. We're in the middle of, or the beginning of, the wet season now. So it rained last night for about probably 6 hours non-stop, pelting down, and there were things on the floor. Luckily the office was dry, although I think there's a bit of a wet spot up there in the back corner. In Jonathan's bedroom, he woke up in almost a swimming pool. It's a harsh environment over here, and their building practices aren't the same as what we have. They don't collect rainwater; it just bolts down the roof and off down onto the ground, and eventually sort of heads down stormwater drains. So it's a tough place to work. It's a tough place to live. And at the same time, it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. So be careful. Be really, really careful. Make sure you get good advice. Make sure you watch a few different videos. Don't take everything I say for granted, because I'm just a guy telling you from my experience. But I'm telling you right now, if you want to come over here and you think it's going to be easy, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be challenging. It's going to stress you mentally. Friends of mine who came over from Australia, they rented a villa. Everything went nice and smooth for them, and then the rain came, and they've been there since the dry season. So 3 or 4 months later, suddenly it started to rain, and they've got a thatched roof, and all the water just came straight in all over their house. Their bedroom was underwater. And so luckily they got onto the owner, the landlord, and said, "Hey, listen, the roof's leaking, and there's termites, there's whiteheads all over the place, getting up in through the woodwork. So I'm worried about if you get up on the ceiling or on the roof, is the whole thing going to collapse?" They were lucky, because the landlord turned around and said, "Tell you what, leave it to us. We're going to sort it out." So they're going to head back to Australia, get some stuff sorted out back at home, and meanwhile the builders are in there, they're going to sort out the roof and fix them up. You can get good service, and the vast majority of situations over here are pretty legitimate, but don't ever think you do it without good legal advice. Don't think you can do anything in a couple of days. You can't come over here for a week or two, get it sorted and go home. You need to be here for several months just to find a place. My mate Dazza, who lost that first villa he was looking at, came over here, and because of the fluctuation in the rental market, there were so many people here from Ukraine and Eastern Europe that the property market just exploded, and something you could have got for $25,000 a year turned out to be like $40,000+. And he needed a place to stay where his wife and him were able to get around with proper mobility, and they've spent a lot of money. Sorry for that frog. They've spent a lot of money just to get here to find their bearings. But in the first 6 months, they've finally found a place that's much cheaper, where they can actually put some roots down. I think they're taking on a long-term contract that's probably longer than they're planning on staying in Bali, but they'll be the next people when their time, when they want to move back to Australia, they'll be renting it out to someone else, or someone else will sell the lease or that contract, and they'll have somewhere in there for the next 25 years and make a bit of income out of it themselves. Man, I'll tell you, I'm disappointed. I'm really disappointed, but everything over here is a story. Everything is a learning opportunity. And so many of the people I talk to on a weekly basis have very similar stories. So I'm going to answer that frog because he wants me to call him back, and then get ready because it's Wednesday night, which means we're heading down to Stonewall. Shut up, frog. I'm heading down to the bar at Stonewall for dinner, catch up with a heap of subscribers, and if you're coming over to Bali, let me know. Catch up with us down at Stonewall, and as I always say, I'll see you when you get here. Cheers, mate.